And hello, everyone. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Step Up to the Mic. Folks, this is the place for aspiring and established speakers to take the stage, to deliver their talks, and to bring them directly to you. Today's featured speaker, he is an ESG and sustainability strategist. He's a fractional CSO, and he's also the author of How to Build Sustainability into Your Business Strategy. Please welcome to the show, Lee Stewart.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just wanted to start off with a key question that I ask my customers, the people in boardrooms that I serve, and the executives. And I want you to think about this. If your business didn't exist tomorrow, would the world notice? Would society, the planet, the community, the environment be better or worse off? Now, it's a confronting question. And often, when I ask that, I often get silence. But it's one I think every leader should sit with, that key question. If you disappeared overnight, would your customers feel the loss? Would your team feel like something meaningful was gone? Would your community even notice? Or are you simply operating in a crowded market, competing on price, speed, and noise? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most businesses are interchangeable. And when you're interchangeable, you're vulnerable. The businesses that endure, the ones that attract capital, keep great people, command greater margins, are the ones that matter beyond that the transaction. And here's where sustainability comes in. Not as a report, not as a marketing campaign, but as a strategy. Now, when I talk about sustainability, I'm not talking about planting a few trees or publishing a glossy report. I'm talking about how you make decisions. I'm talking about what you prioritize when there's pressure on margins. I'm talking about how risk is assessed, how capital is allocated, how success is measured. Because sustainability, when it's embedded properly, is about building a business that can endure. Now, in my work with boards and executives, I've seen this shift happen. The moment sustainability moves from a communications team to the strategy table, everything changes. It stops being a cost center. It starts becoming a competitive advantage. Now, when you truly understand your environmental and social impacts, you start identifying risks earlier than your competitors. You build deeper trust with your customers. You attract better talent. You become more investable. And over time, you become harder to replace. That's the real opportunity. Sustainability is not about being nice. It's about being relevant in a market that is changing. Now, let me give you a very simple example. I work with mid-sized businesses that initially saw sustainability as a reporting obligation. They were reacting to pressure from customers and regulators, so they produced a report. They ticked a few boxes and then moved on back to what they were normally doing. But when we look deeper, when we ask a different question, where are you most exposed? It turned out their biggest risk wasn't carbon reporting, it was supply chain concentration. They were over-reliant on one region that was increasingly exposed to climate disruption and regulatory change. Once they reframed sustainability as a strategic lens, not as a branding exercise, their decisions changed. They diversified suppliers, they invested in operational efficiency, they strengthened governance oversight. Within a few years, they weren't just more compliant, they were more resilient. Their risk profile improved, their conversations and investors changed, their margins stabilized while their competitors were left scrambling. Nothing about it was cosmetic, it was strategy. So let me tell you why I wrote the book, How to Build Sustainability into Your Business Strategy. And I wrote it out of sheer frustration. Over the years, I've sat in too many boardrooms where sustainability has become a reporting exercise. The conversation wasn't about risk. It wasn't about resilience. It wasn't about long-term value creation. It was about disclosure, ticking that box with the regulators and moving on. It was about frameworks. It was about the need to go into the next report. And somewhere along the way, sustainability in the corporate world totally lost its way. And I've seen this happen over the last 20 years. We became very good at measuring things. We became good at publishing things. We got very good talking about ambition, but we're not always very good about changing the decisions and making a difference. And that really bothered me because sustainability was never meant to be solely a communication strategy. It is meant to be a business strategy. I kept seeing organizations invest enormous amounts of time and money into reporting processes, yet sustainability wasn't influencing capital allocation. It wasn't shaping mergers and acquisitions. It wasn't embedded into risk management frameworks in a meaningful way. So I wrote How to Build Sustainability into Business Strategy because I wanted to bring the conversation back to first principles. If sustainability doesn't add value to the business, it becomes little more than window dressing. It looks good, it reads well, photographs nicely in the annual report, but it does nothing to move the dial. And it doesn't influence performance, risk, capital, or competitiveness. It's cosmetic, not strategic. That keeps the commercial edge and reinforces your core message that sustainability must drive tangible value or it simply won't endure. Now, the book I built around is a very simple framework that I want people to understand. It's built around the triple C framework of confidence, commitment, and consistency. And when I see companies do these three things that are quite simple in a deliberate way, they turn sustainability from a compliance exercise into that competitive advantage. Now, I designed the book to be read in a weekend, not studied for a semester, not delegated to a team member. You must be able to read it in a weekend. On Monday, you start asking questions in your business. On Tuesday, those questions start challenging a few assumptions. And by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you start to make some changes in your business and you start doing things a little bit differently. Because sustainability shouldn't live in theory. It should show up how you run business next week. So let me break down the first C, and that's confidence. And I want to be totally blunt here. I've made this mistake myself. I've walked into boardrooms asking for sign-off on a climate target, assuming the foundation was there, assuming there was shared understanding of what we were actually talking about. And in one instance, I realized very quickly while we're discussing carbon reduction pathways, not everyone around the table was even confident what carbon exposure meant to the context of their own business. Now, not because they weren't capable leaders, but because no one had properly connected the dots for them. Now, that was a huge turning point for me because sometimes we rush into targets, commitments, public announcements before building basic confidence and understanding at a leadership level. So confidence is about leaders truly understanding the global macro issues, the big things like climate change, modern slavery, product life cycle, circular economy, plastic ocean waste even, diversity and inclusion, and more importantly, understanding how those issues translate into risks, opportunity, and strategic positioning within their own business model. Ask questions like, what does climate risk mean for our supply chain? What does modern slavery legislation mean for our procurement function? How does circular economy thinking change our product design or margin structure? If leaders cannot confidently answer those questions, sustainability will always sit on a shaky ground. And building confidence doesn't always happen overnight. Sometimes it's a short, sharp education process. Sometimes it takes deliberate conversations over months. But what I found incredibly powerful is anchoring these global issues in business reality. Show what your competitors are doing. Show how capital markets are responding. Show what regulators are signaling. Show what governments are implementing, because leaders see that these aren't abstract social debates, but real commercial shifts where confidence grows. And without confidence, you don't get informed decision-making, you get hesitation, and hesitation delays strategy. The second C is commitment. And this is where I see a lot of organizations come unstuck, because once leaders start understanding the issue, the temptation is to commit to everything. And I've seen companies publish sustainability strategies with 20, 30, sometimes even more commitments. And when I see that, my first thought is they're going to really struggle, not because the intent is wrong, but the focus is missing. When you commit to everything, you really dilute the impact. And over time, the dilution starts to look like greenwashing, even if it wasn't intended that way. Real commitment requires discipline. It forces you to answer the harder question, what truly matters most to our business? Not what sounds good, not what's trending, not what someone else is announcing, what generally intersects with your business model your risk profile, your growth strategy, and where is it being customer centric? That is really critical. You cannot define your commitments in isolation. You need to go out and ask your customers what matters to them. Is it a low carbon product, a slavery free supply chain, circular economy products, reducing of waste? Ask your employers, your suppliers, your communities, your staff, even regulators. Even I've gone out and asked competitors as well. But what you're really asking them is, given who we are as a business, what do we do in the market which sustainably matters most in that context for them? And that's where proper materiality assessments that you're doing becomes really powerful. Now, I've led the process where we've had hundreds, sometimes close to 1,000 survey responses, interviews, the stakeholder inputs. Now, at the beginning, the list is very long. It feels everything is important. But through structured workshops, prioritization, exercises, and rigorous filtering, we distill that down not to 20 priorities, not to 10, but often 3 or 4 critical issues that the business truly stand for. These become the commitments you can hang your hat on. Maybe it's reducing carbon emissions in a way that directly affects operational efficiency. Maybe it's circular economy thinking that reshapes product design that makes you more attractive to your customers. Maybe it's strengthening governance in a highly regulated sector. Could be even investing in communities where you operate because your license to operate depends on a stable workforce. But wherever you are and whatever you do, it must be relevant to your business. The commitment isn't about volume, it's about clarity. But when you're clear about what matters most, you can allocate capital properly, you can align incentives, and you can measure progress meaningfully. And that's where sustainability stops becoming a noise, it starts becoming strategy. And then we come to the final C, which I document in our book, and this is consistency. And sadly, this is where I see so many organizations fall down. They launch with energy with a big announcement, maybe a glossy sustainable report, bold strategy, ambitions, targets set 5, 10, 15 years out or more. And then it slowly over time, it fragments. And that's because sustainability becomes everyone's job, which usually means it becomes no one's responsibility. Or worse, it gets handed to a small sustainability team, maybe 1 or 2 people, and they're suddenly responsible for everything. Reducing carbon emissions, reporting on modern slavery, reducing plastic waste, sorting out the gender pay gap, even intersecting across health and safety of staff members, regulatory responses, customer questionnaires, community expectations. The list is endless, and it becomes a role designed for burnout. And that's because I've felt it myself. And here's the problem. When sustainability sits in that silo, it cannot be delivered consistently. Consistency is about proper governance. It's about structure and clarity of ownership. In the book, I talk about designing your sustainability strategy on a simple plan on a page. Clear, focused, no more than 3 or 4 key priorities. Everyone in the organization understands where they are. Each priority is owned by an executive leader, not the sustainability manager. An executive who is accountable for performance. They report quarterly on that performance. They stand in front of the board at least once a year to speak on progress, challenges, and the trade-offs they're seeing. The sustainability supports and coordinates and advises that, but delivery sits with the leadership team of the business. And that's where consistency starts to take shape, because if one individual leaves the organization, the strategy doesn't just collapse. The governance model holds. There is a cadence, there are regular conversations, there is transparency about what's working and what's not. Ideally, these conversations are happening monthly at an operational level, quarterly at the executive, and then formally to your board. Consistency is what turns intention into performance. It's what keeps businesses true to its commitments when the market pressure builds. And without it, even the most confident leadership team and most well-defined commitments will drift. Consistency is where sustainability becomes embedded into the rhythm of business, not as a campaign, but part of how the organization runs. Now, before I finish, let me introduce you to a couple of practical pro tips, the kind that only come from being in the trenches for 20 odd years and learning the hard way, so to speak. The first one is this. When you're 100% certain, you're most likely too late. Now, I've lost count how many times I've had to revisit sustainability targets with executive teams, boards, because there was a desire for more certainty, more analysis, more modeling. Lee, we need to do more benchmarking. We're not sure about this climate target. Where's the science? There was always another scenario to test, another assumption to validate, another consultant to engage, another round of data to refine. At one point, it almost came comical when I was probably at my wit's end. And I remember sitting in a boardroom, gently reminding the team, including our CFO, that the previous year we missed our financial budget by close to 30%. Now, 30%, despite highly capable finance teams, sometimes the best in the country, sophisticated modeling and months of forecasting. And yet here we were, demanding near perfect certainty on sustainability targets before willing to move. Sometimes you have to point out the obvious. Board and executives are paid to make decisions under ambiguity. If we waited for the perfect information and pricing strategy, acquisitions, hiring, or capital expenditure, nothing would ever get done. Sustainability is no different. Yes, you need rigor. Yes, you need the analysis, but at some point, leadership requires judgment. It requires trust. It requires a confidence to say, this is directionally right and we'll refine as we go. Progress is iterative. You set the direction, you act, you learn, you adjust, and and if you wait for 100% certainty, regulation will move, the market will move, your competitors will move. And then you're no longer leading, you're just in that box in the bottom left quadrant of the reactor. The second pro tip is equally important. If you want sustainability to survive budget pressure, you must make it customer-centric. Now, I've learned this very clearly when I was head of sustainability for a global IT company during a period the business was under severe financial strain. Budgets were tightening, people were being let go, cost lines were being reviewed, and I could see sustainability potentially being scaled back. So instead of defending the function internally, I repositioned it externally. I worked closely with the sales team and made sustainability a deliberate market differentiator. We embedded it into major bids. We highlighted the sustainability attributes of our products. We articulated our supply chain standards. We demonstrated how partnering with us would help customers meet their own emission targets, government expectations, and stakeholder commitments. I would bring together, often for the first time, the client's head of IT and head of sustainability in the same conversation. And in that, something shifted. The dialogue moved beyond price and performance metrics. We began talking about reducing key issues such as e-waste together, how to reduce carbon emissions of IT, how to use technology to enable our customers to hit their sustainability target, about applying artificial intelligence to remove, improve, and energy efficiency of data centers. I even used artificial intelligence to help a key customer, which is a government agency, to find endangered species in remote areas of Australia. We replaced helicopters with commercial drones, saving thousands and thousands of dollars of fuel and operational costs. That's when sustainability stopped being a line item. It became a door opener, a trust builder, a differentiator. This is where the true essence of corporate sustainability is often missed. It's not about primarily reporting your impact. It's about asking, how can we leverage what we do well to help our customers solve their biggest challenges? Now, when you understand the customer's sustainability strategy, their targets, their pressures, and you align your sustainability approach to support them, sustainability moves from a cost center to a commercial advantage. Once sustainability is helping win revenue, strengthening relationships, and building long-term partnerships, it's no longer the first thing considered for budget cuts. It becomes protected. So when you combine the CCC framework, confidence to understand the issues, commitment to focus on what truly matters, consistency to embed governance and accountability, you add the courage to act without perfect certainty and a discipline to stay customer-centric. Sustainability stops being a report, it becomes a strategy. And we come back to the question I started with. If your business didn't exist tomorrow, would the world notice? If sustainability is commercially grounded, strategically focused, consistently governed, and deeply aligned with your customers and your people, the answer becomes yes. And that is how you build a business that's not only responsible, but resilient, relevant, and truly indispensable. Thank you.
Lee Stewart, everybody. Lee, that was absolutely fascinating. I appreciate you coming here and sharing all of that with everybody. I've got just a couple of questions for you if you have a
Sure.
minute to do a little Q&A
Yep. Yep.
afterwards. And again, excellent delivery. If I had your voice, your accent right there, I think I would be a millionaire doing what I do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So, all right then. All right, I tell you what. As we kind of get started here, the ESG and sustainability strategist, fractional CSO. I was doing a little bit of research on this. The fractional CSO. Let everybody know a
Yeah.
little bit about why someone wants to bring in a fractional CSO as opposed to maybe
Yeah.
hiring a full-time person for
Yeah.
that particular job.
Yeah. What I'm seeing now, as I mentioned before, the mid-tier market is now under pressure because they might supply a tier one, and we're talking a $1 billion company that's got a lot more regulation. The regulation we're seeing in Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Europe as well, and bits of California, is forcing these tier one companies to ask in their supply chain things like, what's the carbon emissions of your products you supply us? What's your climate resilience strategy? Are there instances of modern slavery in your supply chain? They're now pushing down on that mid-tier level, and they're kind of caught in the middle, and they're decent enough to worry about these key clients potentially marking them down if they don't have a sustainability strategy, but they're unsure, is it a full-time hire? Do I hire that person? Are they good at setting up something? Because this is a new function for us. Can they set that up properly? And is that the right person to run the program? And I've seen that many times where there's some really good sustainability managers out there, but they are really very bad at trying to design a strategy. Similar to like executive roles, right?
Hmm.
You've got a really good financial controller, but you probably don't have that skill set to design a strategy that's customer centric and helps build, revenue. So what I do is I come in there as a fractional chief sustainability officer. I run that triple C framework through the clients. I help set their targets, their governance. I set up that cadence. And then I coach someone in the role, ideally someone who's got some internal political capital, has been in a business 5 or 10 years, knows how things get done. That's so important. Has some enthusiasm to learn new skills and is willing to learn new skills and has curiosity, which is what I look for. So I would work side by side with that person once I've bedded the strategy down, done those things like a materiality assessment, involve that person early in the process, and I sit with them in their first 2 or 3 board meetings, help them set up the governance, sit in those meetings. Then over time, I step back. So it works really well with a number of clients. I've helped hire their first sustainability manager, train them, and then I know my job's done when I'm sitting in these meetings and I'm not saying anything. It started to run themselves, and then they call me upon some next things. If there's new regulation or new customer acquisition, I help them at a strategic level, but I help bed that down so it's set up for success straight away. So that's what I see the role as that fractional chief sustainability officer should play. Move on, set it up, train, impart your knowledge, and then step back and then jump in as and when you needed. But my goal is to build the capability of what I know across 1,000 new leaders in the next 3 years and help develop them. That's why I wrote the book as well, and I'm doing mentoring programs as well around that.
That's wonderful. All right. I appreciate the explanation. When most of us are in business school and we're, getting our MBAs, most of us are not sitting there going, man, when I get my degree, I really want to be a sustainability strategist. How does
Yes.
somebody, like you get into this particular line of work?
Yeah, it was 20 years ago there definitely wasn't any courses around. So I did a lot of startups around IT and technology around behavior change, using e-learning to help explain to the whole company what is climate change, carbon emissions, and how to get your head across this regulation. Over time, I've sort of honed my skills as I've been head of sustainability in a couple of large multinationals and so forth. And it hasn't been a linear pathway, so to speak. It's been very choppy, but there is, I think anyone doing an MBA now in business should probably have a lens across sustainability and understand that as well.
I see. All right. So
Yeah.
let me ask you about the book real quick. Um,
Yep.
How to build sustainability into your business strategy.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned there was some frustration that went into writing this book and putting it out. And you can kind of tell
Yeah.
a little bit of that when you're talking about putting the
Yeah.
book out.
Yeah. Yeah.
What made you say, hey, I'm going to deliver this? I'm putting this book out there. What's the goal with the book?
Yeah, the goal of the book is I just saw a lot of my peers in business, like those people that didn't know sustainability. They know they need to do something. They've spoken to maybe a couple of consultants. They maybe talked to someone at university, and there's so much information out there. There's so much jargon, and there's a lot of BS, to be totally frank. How does someone, and I wrote it as I was working with a COO of a large retailer. They're almost turning over $1 billion, and he knew he needed to do something. But my God, how do I make all sense of this? How do I simplify this? And I've only had like half an hour with him once a month. So what does he need to know? How do we just cut through all that crap? This is what you need to know. If you're going to start off, this is the best place to start, is read the book, start asking questions, start doing something. Don't be paralyzed by thinking you're going to get things wrong, or science tells me this, or this professor said that, or this big four consultant is trying to sell me a $500,000 program. Start doing things. You can do things very simple, and in asking questions in your business, go to, if you're a large energy user, go to the source of where your energy is consumed and used, and understand, is there opportunities for energy efficiency that could save you money straight away. So I just wanted to build people's confidence to start doing. There's far too much talk in sustainability ESG, and I'm quite frankly over it. I want to work with companies that want to get shit done, basically, and not talk about it. And there's a lot of easy, quick wins that can happen with someone willing to invest just 3 hours in reading my book and going out and doing stuff. And I think anyone in business is looking for that sort of career advantage. Learning a bit about sustainability is not a bad thing.
Love that. All right. And so there's action steps in the book in terms of, things
Yeah,
you put into
yeah,
practice as soon as you put the book down.
yeah, yeah. I've got things like how to do your first carbon footprint. What does waste mean? What is the issue of modern slavery going to mean to your business if you've got a supply chain that goes through Southeast Asia? These sort of things that you've got to be careful of.
Right.
Because if you're a big brand, they're not going to care. They're going to come after you if something in your supply chain is not good, right?
Right.
You can just think about all those big brands that have had issues in the past. Unfortunately, those still exist with not treating people properly. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, Lee, I loved the talk. I thought it was great. Tell everybody how they can reach you, find out more, and find out more about the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, look, oh, sorry, my book probably doesn't come through. That's a blur, but my book's on Amazon.
Okay.
Author Lee Stewart, Leestewart. So you can get the ebook or download it on Amazon, or order a copy. My website is esgstrategy, all one word, .com.au. And from there, you can book a chat with me anytime if you want to delve in a bit more. If you've got some questions, you can just, from my website, you can easily book a 20-minute conversation for me with no obligation. If you've got a question or anything, happy to help. Happy to point you in the right direction. And also, um, always wanting to move the dial. If you got an opportunity to do something in your business and you're paralyzed, you're not sure where to go, book a chat with me. Hopefully I can point you in the right direction and get you underway.
Wonderful. All right. I was just going to bring that up about the free call. So I'm glad you mentioned that too. I appreciate
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
All right. Good
Sure.
deal. ESG and sustainability strategist, fractional CSO, and author of the book, How to Build Sustainability into Your Business Strategy, Lee Stewart. Thank you for joining us today on our program. Love the talk, and hope we see you again here soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Folks, this has been another spectacular episode of Step Up to the Mic. If you're an aspiring or current speaker and you want to bring your talk to the masses, message us today. Never stop talking, and let us help you to step up to the mic.